The $1 ranch that changed everything. What would you do if you bought land for just $1 and discovered it came with 5 mysterious women and deadly secrets? Hit that subscribe button and stay till the end. This story will blow your mind. The deed said the ranch was abandoned, empty, forgotten by time, and forsaken by hope. Jake Thompson clutched the crumpled paper that had cost him exactly $1, staring at the weathered wooden house that shouldn't have smoke curling from its chimney. Yet there it was, thin gray ribbons dancing against the pale sky like ghosts of conversations he wasn't meant to hear. The property stretched endlessly in all directions, isolated from civilization by miles of untamed prairie grass near Dusty Creek Valley, and silence so complete it made his ears ring. This was supposed to be his sanctuary, his escape from a world that had chewed him up and spat him back out with nothing but regret in his pockets. The seller had been nervous, almost desperate to get rid of the place, stumbling over words about why anyone would want to live so far from everything that mattered. But as Jake approached the front porch, he heard something that made his blood freeze in his veins. Laughter, soft, feminine voices drifting through the wooden walls like music from another lifetime. The sound was warm, inviting, completely at odds with the abandoned wasteland he'd been promised. He counted at least 3 distinct voices, maybe more, weaving together in conversation, too muffled to understand, but too real to ignore. The front door stood slightly ajar, revealing nothing but shadows, and the faint glow of what might have been candlelight or lamplight flickering against interior walls. A rocking chair on the porch swayed gently in the afternoon breeze, its rhythm suggesting someone had been sitting there moments before his arrival. Fresh laundry hung on a line and stretched between 2 posts, the fabric still damp and smelling of soap and sunshine. Everything about this place screamed occupancy, life, purpose. Yet the deed in his hand insisted otherwise, stamped with official seals that declared this land empty and available for immediate possession. Someone was lying, but Jake couldn't figure out who or why. The seller had sworn on his mother's grave that nobody had lived here for years, that the isolation had driven away every previous owner until the bank finally gave up trying to sell it for anything more than pocket change. Now, standing at the threshold of what should have been his solitude, Jake realized he'd bought more than just land and buildings. He'd purchased a mystery that came with voices behind closed doors and secrets that someone had gone to great lengths to keep buried. The question wasn't whether he should knock or walk away. The question was whether the women inside were hiding from the world or if the world was hiding them from him. Before Jake could decide whether to knock or retreat, the decision was made for him. The front door swung open with a soft creak, revealing a woman who looked as startled to see him as he was to see her. She had auburn hair pinned back in a practical style and wore a simple dress that had seen better days, but was clean and well-mended. Her green eyes widened as they took in his travel-worn appearance and the leather saddlebag slung over his shoulder. "You must be lost," she said, her voice carrying a slight tremor that suggested she was more nervous than concerned. "There's nothing out here for miles except empty land and broken dreams." Jake held up the deed, the paper rustling in the afternoon breeze. "Actually, I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. This is my land now. I bought it fair and square from the territorial office in Copper Ridge." He studied her face for any sign of recognition or guilt, but found only confusion and something that might have been fear. The woman stepped back into the doorway, her hand gripping the frame as if she needed support. "That's impossible. Nobody's owned this place for years. We've been—" She stopped herself, pressing her lips together as if she'd already said too much. "We?" Jake took a step closer, his boots heavy on the wooden porch. "How many of you are living in my house?" From somewhere inside came the sound of hurried footsteps and hushed whispers. The woman glanced over her shoulder, then back at Jake with an expression that mixed defiance with desperation. "I'm Sarah Rose, and we're not squatters, if that's what you're thinking. We have every right to be here." "Based on what?" Jake kept his voice level, but his patience was wearing thin. He'd traveled 3 days through hostile territory to reach this place, expecting solitude and finding a household full of women who seemed to think they belonged here more than he did. Sarah straightened her shoulders, drawing herself up to her full height, which still left her several inches shorter than Jake. "Based on necessity, based on survival, based on the fact that sometimes the law and what's right don't line up the way they should. Behind her, a shadow moved past the doorway, followed by another. Jake caught glimpses of long hair and feminine silhouettes, evidence that Sarah hadn't been exaggerating about the we pay. 4 other women emerged from the shadows of the main room, each studying him with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion. The first was tall and graceful with dark hair that caught the lamplight, her posture suggesting someone accustomed to being in charge. The second was petite with blonde curls and quick, intelligent eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of his appearance. The third had striking red hair and a direct gaze that made Jake feel like she could see straight through to his intentions. The fourth was younger than the others with brown hair and a shy smile that disappeared the moment he looked her way. "Ladies," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room, "this is Jake Thompson. He claims to have bought our home." The dark-haired woman stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. "I'm Catherine Wells. I don't care what piece of paper you're carrying, mister. This ranch has been our sanctuary for 2 years. We've planted crops, repaired buildings, and made this place livable again after it was left to rot. And we're not leaving," added the redhead, crossing her arms over her chest. "I'm Victoria Stone, and I can tell you right now that 5 determined women can make life very difficult for one stubborn man." The petite blonde nodded in agreement. "Annie Brooks. We've heard promises before from men who claimed they could solve our problems. They all wanted something in return that we weren't willing to give." The youngest woman remained silent, but Jake noticed how she positioned herself behind the others as if seeking their protection. When Sarah caught his glance, she stepped protectively in front of the girl. "Lily Harper doesn't talk to strangers," Sarah explained, her tone making it clear that this wasn't a suggestion, but a warning. Jake removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair as he tried to process what he'd walked into. "I understand you've made this place your home, but I have legal ownership. The question is, what were you running from that brought you here in the first place?" The women exchanged glances loaded with meaning, and Jake realized he'd just asked the one question they'd been hoping he wouldn't ask. Catherine's composure cracked slightly. Annie bit her lip nervously, and Victoria's defiant expression faltered. It was Sarah who finally spoke, her words dropping into the silence like stones into still water. "The same thing you're running from, I'd imagine. The difference is, we found each other, and we're not about to let anyone tear apart what we've built here, no matter what the law says." Mid-story CTA. If you're loving this incredible story of courage and mystery, smash that like button right now. The plot is about to take a shocking turn that will leave you speechless. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss our amazing stories. The silence stretched between them like a taut rope ready to snap. Jake could see the fear flickering behind their brave facades, the way they unconsciously moved closer together when he'd mentioned running. These weren't ordinary women who'd simply chosen an unconventional lifestyle. They were hiding from something or someone dangerous enough to drive them to the middle of nowhere. "I'm not here to judge anyone," Jake said carefully, setting his saddlebags down near the door. "I came here looking for peace, same as you, but I need to understand what I've walked into." Catherine glanced toward the window, her body tensing as if she expected to see riders approaching across the prairie. "Understanding can be a luxury we can't afford. Some secrets are better left buried." "Not when they affect my safety, too," Jake replied. "If there's trouble coming, I need to know about it." Victoria let out a bitter laugh. "Trouble, mister? Trouble is what we left behind. This place has been our fortress, our escape from men who think they own whatever they can take by force." Annie nodded, her small hands twisting the fabric of her skirt. "We've learned to trust each other because we had no choice. Trust doesn't come easy when you've been betrayed by people who were supposed to protect you." Lily stepped forward slightly, her young face pale but determined. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "They said we'd never find anywhere to hide, that they'd always find us." The admission hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach as he realized the implications. These women weren't just running from individual problems. They were running from predators who had the resources and determination to hunt them across territories. "Who's they?" he asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. Sarah stepped between Jake and the others, her protective instincts flaring. Men with money and power who don't like being told no. Men who consider women property to be bought, sold, or stolen as the mood strikes them. How did you all end up here together? We found each other along the way, Catherine said, her voice growing stronger. Each of us alone was vulnerable. Together, we had a chance. Jake studied their faces, seeing the steel beneath the fear. These women had survived something that would have broken lesser people. They'd built a life together in the harshest environment imaginable, and they were prepared to fight to keep it. The man who sold me this land, he said slowly, seemed awfully eager to get rid of it, like he was afraid of something. The women exchanged another loaded glance, and this time it was Annie who spoke. He should be afraid. We made sure of that. Before Jake could ask what she meant, the sound of hoofbeats echoed across the prairie, growing closer with each passing second. The hoofbeats grew thunderous as they approached, and Jake watched the women transform before his eyes. Fear was replaced by grim determination as they moved with practiced efficiency. Catherine grabbed a rifle from behind the door while Victoria disappeared into another room, returning with a shotgun and a bandolier of shells. Annie quickly extinguished the lamps, plunging the house into dimness while Lily moved to a window, peering through a gap in the curtains. 3 riders, Lily whispered, her voice steady despite the terror in her eyes. They're slowing down, circling the house. Sarah turned to Jake, her green eyes hard as flint. This is your chance to walk away. Go out the back door, get on your horse, and ride hard toward town. Pretend you never saw us. Jake felt the weight of his own gun against his hip, the familiar comfort of steel and wood that had kept him alive through countless dangerous situations. How many times have they come looking for you? This is the 4th time in 2 years, Victoria said, checking her ammunition with steady hands. Each time they get closer to finding us. What do they want? What men like that always want, Catherine replied, her voice bitter with old wounds. To drag us back to lives we'd rather die than live. Through the window, Jake could see the shadowy figures of the riders as they completed their circle around the house. They were taking their time, confident in their superiority of numbers and firepower. These weren't desperate men making a reckless assault. They were hunters who'd cornered their prey and were savoring the moment. They know we're here, Annie whispered, pressing herself against the wall beside the window. They're not even trying to hide. One of the riders called out, his voice carrying the arrogant authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Ladies, we know you're in there. We've been tracking you for weeks, and we're not leaving without what we came for. Lily's hands shook as she gripped the windowsill. It's him. It's really him. Who? Jake asked, but the look of pure terror on Lily's face told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't just about money or property. This was personal. The rider continued his taunts. You can come out peacefully, or we can come in and get you. Either way, you're coming home with us tonight. Jake found himself at a crossroads that would define not just this moment, but the man he chose to be. He could slip out the back, as Sarah had suggested, preserving his own safety while abandoning 5 women to whatever fate awaited them, or he could stay and fight alongside strangers who had already shown more courage in the face of impossible odds than most men would muster in a lifetime. The choice was taken from him when the front door exploded inward, splintering wood and shattering the fragile piece they'd all been clinging to. The first man through the broken door was built like a bull with shoulders that barely fit through the frame and hands that could crush bone without effort. His eyes swept the darkened room until they fixed on Lily, and his face split into a predatory grin that made Jake's skin crawl. There's our little runaway, the man said, his voice thick with satisfaction. Did you really think you could hide from me forever, darling? Jake stepped forward, positioning himself between the intruder and the women. This is private property. You're trespassing. The man's attention shifted to Jake, his expression changing from amusement to annoyance. And you are? The owner of this ranch, Jake replied, his hand resting on his gun handle. I'm telling you to leave now. A second man pushed through the doorway, this one leaner but carrying himself with the cold confidence of a professional killer. Bruno, we don't have time for this. Grab the girls and let's go. Victoria raised her shotgun, the barrel steady despite the tremor in her voice. "We're not going anywhere with you animals." Bruno laughed, the sound harsh and grating in the confined space. "You always were feisty, Victoria. That's why you're worth the trouble of tracking down." His gaze moved to each woman in turn, lingering on their faces like a man appraising livestock. "All of you are. Do you have any idea how much money you've cost us by running away?" "Money?" Sarah's voice was sharp with disgust. "Is that what you think this is about? Money?" "Everything's about money, sweetheart," Bruno replied. "You girls were investments, and investments are supposed to pay returns." The third rider appeared in the doorway, smaller than the other two, but carrying an air of authority that marked him as the leader. When he spoke, his voice was cultured, educated, and infinitely more dangerous than the crude threats of his companions. "Ladies, gentlemen, let's discuss this like civilized people," he said, removing his hat with mock courtesy. "I'm sure we can reach an arrangement that satisfies everyone's needs." Lily whimpered, pressing herself against the wall as if she could disappear into the wood itself. "No, please. I won't go back. I can't." "Oh, but you will," the leader said, his tone gentle but implacable. "You all will. You see, you have something that belongs to me, and I always collect what's mine." Jake felt the moment crystallize around him, each detail sharp and clear. The weight of his gun, the sound of Victoria's breathing, the way Sarah's jaw was set in defiant lines, the terror radiating from Lily like heat from a forge. These men weren't just criminals. They were predators who saw women as property to be owned and used. "They don't belong to anyone," Jake said, drawing his weapon in one smooth motion. The leader smiled, and Jake realized he'd just walked into a trap that had been years in the making. The leader's smile widened as he took in Jake's drawn weapon, his eyes glittering with amusement rather than fear. "Ah, the noble defender. How refreshingly predictable." He gestured casually to his men, who shifted their positions with the practiced ease of wolves preparing to strike. "Tell me, Mr. Thompson, was it? Do you know what you're really defending?" Jake kept his gun steady, though something cold was beginning to crawl up his spine. "I know enough." "Do you?" The leader stepped further into the room, his movements deliberately casual. "Did they tell you about the money they stole, the contracts they destroyed, the lives they ruined when they disappeared into the night like thieves?" "That's not true," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" The leader pulled a folded document from his coat, holding it up for everyone to see. "This is a promissory note signed by each of these ladies agreeing to work off debts totaling $15,000, money that was spent on their transportation, housing, and care." Annie's face went white. "You know those contracts were illegal. No court would uphold them." "Perhaps not," the leader conceded. "But theft is theft, regardless of the legalities involved. And when you disappeared, you took something far more valuable than money." Victoria's grip tightened on her shotgun. "We didn't take anything that wasn't already ours." The leader's expression hardened. "You took my ledger, the one containing the names, locations, and financial arrangements of every girl I've placed in the past 5 years. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "That ledger is worth more than all of your lives combined." Jake felt the pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. These women hadn't just run from individual predators. They'd stolen evidence that could destroy an entire network of human traffickers. The ledger would contain proof of crimes that could bring down dozens of wealthy and powerful men. "Where is it?" Bruno growled, taking a step toward Lily. "We know one of you has it hidden somewhere." Lily pressed herself flatter against the wall, her breathing rapid and shallow. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, but you do, my dear," the leader said softly. "You were always the clever one, the one who paid attention to details, the one who understood that information was power." Catherine moved protectively closer to Lily. "Even if we had your precious ledger, what makes you think we'd give it to you?" "Because the alternative is unpleasant for everyone involved," the leader replied. "You see, that ledger doesn't just contain evidence of my business dealings. It also contains the real names and locations of every girl who's ever worked for me. Girls who are now scattered across the territory trying to build new lives." The implication hit Jake like a physical blow. The ledger wasn't just evidence. It was a weapon that could be used to hunt down every woman who'd ever escaped this man's control. "If anything happens to us," Annie said quietly, "copies of that ledger go to every federal marshal and newspaper editor from here to California." The leader's smile returned, cold and patient. "I was hoping you'd say that." The leader reached into his coat again, this time producing a brass pocket watch that gleamed in the dim light. "You see, ladies, I've spent the last 2 years tracking down every contact you might have made, every person you might have trusted with copies of my ledger." He clicked the watch open, studying its face with theatrical precision. 3 hours ago, my associates visited the newspaper office in Silver Mesa. 2 hours ago, they called on Marshal Davidson in Copper Ridge. An hour ago, they found the school teacher in Pine Valley, who was so eager to help displaced women find new lives. Sarah's face went ashen. "You're lying." "Am I?" The leader snapped the watch closed. Each of them was given a simple choice: hand over any documents related to 5 runaway women or face the consequences of harboring stolen property. His smile was razor sharp. "I'm pleased to report that they all chose cooperation over heroism." Annie stumbled backward, her small frame shaking. "Martha wouldn't give you anything. She'd die first." "Oh, my dear child," the leader said with mock sympathy. "Why do you think it took my men so long to visit her?" The implication hung in the air, fire like poison, and Jake watched the women's carefully constructed defenses crumble. They had built their safety on the assumption that evidence scattered across the territory would protect them, but their enemy had systematically dismantled their insurance policy while hunting them down. Victoria's shotgun wavered in her hands. "Even if that's true, the ledger itself is still hidden. You'll never find it without us." "Actually," the leader said, consulting his watch again, "my men should be finishing their search of the root cellar about now." As if summoned by his words, footsteps approached from the back of the house. A 4th man appeared in the rear doorway, carrying a leather-bound book that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy in the lamplight. "Found it buried under the turnips, boss," the man said, tossing the ledger to his leader. "Just like you said it would be." Lily let out a broken sob, her last hope visibly draining away. "How did you know?" "Simple psychology, my dear," the leader replied, leafing through the pages with evident satisfaction. "Desperate people always hide their treasures in the most obvious places: food storage, false bottoms in trunks, loose floorboards under beds. You may have learned to shoot and fight, but you never learned to think like criminals." Jake felt the situation sliding beyond anyone's control. The women's carefully laid plans had been anticipated and countered at every turn. Their enemy hadn't just tracked them down, he had orchestrated their complete defeat with methodical precision. "So what happens now?" Jake asked, though he dreaded the answer. The leader closed the ledger with a soft snap. "Now, Mr. Thompson, you face the same choice I offered the others. Walk away and forget you ever saw us, or join these ladies in learning why nobody steals from me." The sound of more horses approaching echoed across the prairie, and Jake realized the trap was closing from all sides. But the approaching hoofbeats weren't more of the leader's men. They were federal marshals, and Jake realized that Lily had been far cleverer than anyone had given her credit for. "You made one mistake," Lily said, her voice steady for the first time since the confrontation began. "You assumed I was just the scared little girl who needed protecting." The leader's confident expression faltered as the sound of approaching horses grew louder. "What did you do?" "I sent a telegram to the territorial governor 3 days ago," Lily replied, stepping away from the wall with newfound confidence. "Not copies of your ledger, but something better. I sent him the names and locations of every federal official you've been bribing, along with bank records showing the payments." Marshal badges gleamed in the doorway as 3 armed lawmen surrounded the house, their weapons trained on the traffickers. The leader's face went white as he recognized the impossibility of his situation. "You see," Lily continued, "while you were tracking down our insurance policies, I was destroying yours. Every corrupt marshal, every bought judge, every politician in your pocket got a visit from federal investigators this morning." The leader spun toward his men, but Bruno and the others were already raising their hands in surrender. Professional killers they might be, but they weren't stupid enough to fight federal marshals when their employer's empire was crumbling around them. "Victor Blackwood," called the lead marshal, stepping through the doorway with his badge prominently displayed. "You're under arrest for human trafficking, conspiracy, and about 15 other charges that should keep you busy for the rest of your natural life." Blackwood's mask of civilized authority finally cracked completely. "You don't understand what you've done," he snarled at Lily. "There are dozens of girls out there who depend on the protection my organization provides. Without my network, they'll be defenseless." "They'll be free," Sarah corrected, her voice ringing with hard-won wisdom. "There's a difference." As the marshals led Blackwood and his men away in chains, Jake found himself alone with the 5 women who had turned his simple desire for solitude into something far more complex and meaningful. The ranch house, damaged but still standing, seemed to exhale with relief. "So," he said, removing his hat and running his fingers through his hair, "I guess this means you'll be leaving now that you're safe." The women exchanged glances, and this time their shared look held hope instead of fear. "Actually," Catherine said, "we were thinking this place could use a man who knows how to stand his ground when it matters." Victoria nodded. "Someone who understands that some things are worth fighting for." Annie smiled shyly. "We could use help with the heavy work around here." Lily stepped forward, no longer the frightened girl she had pretended to be. "Besides, you paid good money for this ranch. Wouldn't make sense to let it go to waste." Sarah met his eyes directly. "We're offering you a partnership, Jake Thompson. Equal shares in the land, the work, and the profits." Jake looked around at the home these remarkable women had built from nothing, defended against impossible odds, and were now willing to share with a stranger who had proven himself when it counted most. For the first time in years, he felt like he had found exactly where he belonged. "Well then," he said, settling his hat back on his head, "I suppose we'd better get to work." What an incredible journey. If this story of courage, justice, and finding family in unexpected places touched your heart, make sure to smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Share this video with someone who loves amazing Western tales, and let us know in the comments what you thought of Jake and the 5 brave women. Your support keeps these incredible stories coming. Consider leaving a super chat to help us bring you more unforgettable adventures from the untamed frontier. Until next time, keep riding toward your dreams.